The film begins with a group of young people staying awake by the sea at night. Among them are a girl named Sara and her friend Barbara. The youngsters are playing games, lighting a fire, and competing to see who can jump over the flames. The next morning, the coach enters the dormitory and wakes everyone up. We learn that they are at a summer camp, preparing for a rowing competition. The coach asks his assistant, Lorenzo, to explain how to use the boats and coordinate with the wind. However, Lorenzo makes a mistake, and Sara corrects him. At the end of the day, the coach asks everyone to go back to the dormitory and sleep. However, Sara notices fireworks in the sky and asks Lorenzo about them. Lorenzo explains that it is the end of summer celebration, held every year on the island. Sara asks him, "How have you been coming here for 4 years and never attended this celebration?" Lorenzo then takes her hand and says, "Come on, let's go before the coach notices." They leave the camp and try to reach the island but fail. Eventually, they find a restaurant and go inside. The restaurant owner tells them that the celebration is being held on the other side of the island. They stay at the restaurant and dance together. Afterward, they return to the camp, but the coach sees them as they enter. The next day, during practice, Sara falls from her boat into the water and injures her leg. She returns to her room to apply ice to her leg. Lorenzo visits her to check on her. After that, the camp ends and everyone returns home. Sara asks Barbara not to tell her mother about her fall from the boat. When Sara gets home, she picks up the plate she was eating from and goes to the kitchen, but the plate falls to the ground. Sara sits on the floor and holds her leg, the one that had been hurting at the camp. Her mother takes her to the hospital, and her father, who has just returned from a trip, also comes to the hospital. The doctor tells them that Sara's muscular dystrophy has progressed. It becomes clear that Sara has been undergoing treatment for a long time. Sara, feeling sad and alone, goes for a walk and talks to Barbara. She tells Barbara that soon she won't be able to walk anymore. Meanwhile, Lorenzo is preparing for the rowing competition. On the first day of school, Sara and Barbara plan to go home together, but Lorenzo is waiting for Sara outside the school. He calls out to her and asks how she is doing. Sara says she is fine. Lorenzo explains that he tried calling her several times, but didn't get a response. Sara replies that she's been busy. At that moment, Sara's mother arrives, and she gets into the car with Barbara. However, Lorenzo throws his phone through the window towards Barbara and calls it to talk to Sara. Sara agrees to meet him, and Lorenzo takes her to a museum her mother used to take her to as a child. Lorenzo and Sara enter a hall and lie down on the floor, looking at the ceiling. The ceiling is designed to appear open, with birds flying across it. When they return home, Sara's father sees them. The next day at school, Barbara asks Sara if she has told Lorenzo about her illness. When Sara says no, Barbara urges her to do so, but Sara gets upset and walks away. Later, Sara's parents take her straight from school to the hospital. The doctor decides to send her to a rehabilitation center. Sara trains with the doctor, but feels a lot of pain. After that, she meets with Lorenzo. At the party, Lorenzo's father calls out to him and asks if he'll be late coming home, to which Lorenzo replies no. However, he tells Sara that the man is just the club's repairman. In the next scene, Lorenzo and Sara go to the seaside, and Lorenzo hugs her. But when he sets her down, Sara's leg starts hurting again. During her rehabilitation session, Sara tells her doctor about the incident, but the doctor mistakenly thinks Sara is talking about Lorenzo. The doctor says, "If someone loves you, they'll accept you just as you are." These words inspire Sara to decide to tell Lorenzo the truth about her illness. However, when she gets home, she sees Lorenzo's bike parked outside her house. Upon entering, she realizes her parents have told Lorenzo everything. Sara tries to explain that she was planning to tell him herself, but Lorenzo becomes upset and leaves the house. Lorenzo goes home and talks to his aunt. He says he's afraid he won't be able to cope with the pain of losing his mother like his father did. His aunt explains to him that his father chose to live in grief. Just then, Lorenzo's father enters and says that a girl is waiting for him outside. It turns out that Sara has come to the club and asked about the club's repairman. His father directs him to go to Sara. Lorenzo goes downstairs and talks to Sara. They make up, and Lorenzo borrows a boat from one of his father's friends. They spend the day together in a cave. That night, when Sara returns home, Her mother asks her why she left school without informing anyone and stayed out so late. The next day, Sara is waiting for Lorenzo in the street, but he's late for his training. At that moment, Sara feels unwell and is taken to the hospital. When Lorenzo finds out, he goes to the hospital, but Sara's mother angrily tells him, "We already told you how she's doing. Stay away from her. She can't have a normal life like other girls." Sara returns home, and Barbara comes to visit her to make up. They talk in Sara's room, and Sara tells her everything. Lorenzo calls her multiple times, but Sara doesn't answer. She goes back to the rehabilitation center to continue her therapy, but there, she learns that the little girl she had been training with suddenly passed away. This news deeply affects Sara's emotional state. Meanwhile, Lorenzo searches for his friend, who should be accompanying him in the competition. However, he finds him at a party, drunk and unconscious. Lorenzo goes to his coach to talk about finding a replacement, but the coach insults him, saying, "You're a poor person, and you can't even afford to buy a life jacket. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't be here." These words cause Lorenzo to pack his things and leave the club. At that moment, Lorenzo's phone rings, and we see Sara, who is shopping for clothes with her mother. When Sara goes into the fitting room to try on some clothes, she sees Lorenzo standing outside. It turns out that Sara's mother had called him and asked him to come see Sara, as her emotional state had worsened due to the death of the little girl. Sara's mother invites Lorenzo to their house, and he buys flowers for them. After dinner, Lorenzo shows Sara a flyer for a rowing competition. The competition is hosted by the club of one of her father's friends, where they had previously borrowed a boat. He convinces Sara to replace her friend and join the competition with him. At first, Sara is worried about her health and goes to Barbara for advice. Barbara encourages her and says, "You've won many prizes before. This competition is too small for you." Sara goes to the doctor with her family to ask if she can participate in the competition. The doctor explains that it could worsen her condition, but ultimately gives her medical clearance. On the day of the competition, Sara and Lorenzo go to the event, and the first day is spent on training and preparation. On the second day, the competition begins. Sara is initially scared, but with Lorenzo's support, she gets into the boat. They finish in third place, but at the end, Sara loses her balance and falls into the water. The boat also capsizes. A few months later, Lorenzo visits Barbara. He gives her a small box. Lorenzo takes the box to the museum they had visited with Sara. He enters the hall, opens the box, and takes out Sara's necklace. Then he lies down on the ground and looks up at the ceiling. He sees birds flying out from the ceiling. The film ends with this scene. I hope you enjoyed watching the video. To see more videos, please subscribe to the channel and give me energy with your likes and comments.